Welcome to Starting Lineup Fantasy Friends with Andrew Wiebe. I'm Jason Saghini, and it is a huge week in MLS Fantasy. This is the week that you can qualify for the U.S. Open Cup of MLS Fantasy. It's the Fantasy Cup, Andrew. How do they get in?
Look, if you've already got a team, you've got nothing to do. Set your lineup, forget it. You'll be entered if you're one of those top 1,600 and some. You'll go right in.
16,000.
So, yeah, that's right. 16,384, I think, to hit you with the exact number there. But you'll go into that single elimination tournament. If you haven't signed up, maybe you're watching this video for the first time, MLSsoccer.com/fantasy is the place to go. Sign up, set your team. There are still prizes to be had for you, some free MLS gear at the end of the line, but this is for the long haul, so make sure you don't forget. Every week, you got to be setting that lineup. Otherwise, you'll be out of luck come MLS Cup.
All right, speaking of the long haul, Andrew, we'll give you some credit. Your wild card team from a few weeks back was average the first week, but last week you guys came through.
Oh, big 120 points. Team Wiebe, Blas Perez doing work. He was hot, very, very hot, and you know what I got to do right now? Sorry, Team Saghini, you guys, so much faith in Jason. Where were my supporters? Well, you got rewarded. Big time week. I think my personal team did pretty well as well.
All right. Blas Perez, 18 points. The guys I picked, Valeri Morales, 16 and 13. I think the fantasy folks out there are okay with those scores.
Almost is not good enough for Team Wiebe.
You probably did well for yourself. All right, there's plenty more to note for this week. It's a double fixture week next week for 4 teams: Seattle, Chivas, Houston, and Columbus. That's going to be very important as you make transfers this week and, of course, next week. And the other thing to keep in mind, World Cup qualifying next week. That means a lot of big names are going to be out. The Clint Dempseys, the Eddie Johnsons, Brad Evans. That's just the Sounders. And that's just the Americans. There's also international players to consider.
Yeah, and make sure you keep an eye on CONCACAF. Those call-ups will start trickling out in the next few days. I mentioned Blas Perez. He's a shoo-in to be with Panama. You look at Honduras, guys like Marvin Chavez, Victor Bernardes. Those are guys to watch out for. People will be leaving these teams. A lot of them are big contributors in fantasy. Make sure you don't get caught empty-handed.
All right, speaking of Victor Bernardes, the other thing we should mention is suspension. So plenty of guys suspended, including Federico Higuain. He is actually out the next 2 games, yellow card accumulation and a red card. And that's big because obviously with Columbus having that double fixture week next week, he's basically the only guy in Columbus you want on your fantasy team at this point, and he's out.
Yeah, he's a guy that you're not going to be able to replace at that point. You're going to have to go elsewhere outside Columbus. Wait and see on them. Maybe you can get their back line in that double week. A couple other guys to think about. Amobi Akugo, one of those really widely owned midfielders in the league. He is not going to be playing this weekend. Drop him or bench him if you have to. And then there's that trio in San Jose. So if you've got a big San Jose contingent, make sure you got the right guys.
Yeah, it's Victor Bernardes, Justin Morrow, and Rafa Baca. Hey, 2 of the starters on the defensive line for the Earthquakes are out, and that means good things for the LA Galaxy playing them at home this week. So let's get into the questions that come in. First 2 coming in from Kenna Owens, and 1 is about the Earthquakes. Chris Wondolowski, is he worth keeping right now, and do you expect him to be called up for international duty?
Well, we'll start with the second question. I don't expect Chris Wondolowski to be called up for second. I don't know how you got that back. That's incredible. But don't pick up Chris Wondolowski at this time. He won't be with that US team in all likelihood. And yes, there are usually fireworks in the Cali Classico, but I think they're coming strictly from the Galaxy this time. San Jose, as you mentioned, 2 defenders out. I think Robbie Keane and Landon Donovan run riot. If you've got an extra million, grab Keane. If you don't, take a look at Marco Di Vaio. He's a whole million less than Wando right now, and Camilo's also a good choice if you're going to stay in Canada.
Yeah, something else to think about for Chris Wondolowski. He's actually on yellow card accumulation. I didn't mention this before, but you can check out the disciplinary report on MLSsoccer.com to find out who's suspended and, of course, who is on yellow card accumulation. Those games against the Galaxy get feisty when San Jose comes to town. Wando picks up a yellow card. He's out for one of the next matchups because he has 2 good home games coming up, but I'm a little worried about that. So I'm getting rid of Wando as well. I picked up Robbie Keane this week. Kenna's second question is, who is a must-have pick at forward? So obviously we talked about Robbie Keane. Andrew, who else are you going for?
Well, I said Marco Di Vaio as well, but I'm going to go a little off the beaten path. I think Juan Agudelo is a bargain right now, on the cusp of exploding, has got 2 goals in his last game. Well, that was sneaky. I'm not sure what that says. I hope it's nothing against Team Wiebe. You know our position in this. Anyway, Juan Agudelo, great pickup. They've got 2 home games coming up along with 2 road games. I think with that partnership with Diego Fagundes, he's in line for more goals.
All right, a couple of guys that I want to look at. Eric Torres, a double week for Chivas next week. He showed you that he can score points, that, Chivas isn't a fantasy abyss. Thierry Henry, also a good schedule coming up. I don't like his game at Houston next week, but the games surrounding it are good for him. Those are some guys to look at upcoming for forwards. Zach Steinberg, he asked the next question. He's moving back one line and says, who's the best midfielder that I can get right now?
Well, if we're not talking about U.S. men's national team call-ups, it's Landon Donovan in a landslide. 3 straight weeks above 10 points, 19, 10, and 10. With Robbie Keane on form, he's the obvious choice. But I think we all expect him to be called up for these World Cup qualifiers. That puts a hole in your lineup come round 29. So obviously, Diego Valeria, a good pickup, but I think Felipe right now is an under-the-radar guy that you could go with. Only 2.2% ownership. He's got DeVio ahead of him, starting to round into form. He could be a good bet for you going forward.
All right, I looked at this as short-term and long-term. This week, I like Russell Tibert, Javier Morales, and, of course, Landon Donovan. But over the long haul here, I'm looking at guys like Diego Valeri and Darlington Nagbe. The way the Portland Timbers play, they have the bulk of the ball. They're scoring a lot of goals. So as far as I'm concerned, those guys are good pickups coming up. You look at their schedule after this tough game at Salt Lake. They have home game against Toronto, at Chivas, then home against Colorado, LA, and away at Vancouver. They're going to score a lot of goals over that stretch. That's a good portion of time that you can hold on to these guys and not have to worry about making trades. Final question coming in from Pete Chambers. He says, is it worth -4 points to pick up Mauro Rosales and dump Clint Dempsey right now?
Well, here's something to consider, Pete. You could do it next week. You don't have to lose those 4 points. Dempsey will be around in Columbus. I think he's a good bet still this week, but you do want to do that coming into those games. Dempsey won't be around for that double week. You want to take advantage of the Seattle Sounders. I'm not sure what that one says. It has our producer in giggles right now, but here's the deal. I did drop Clint Dempsey. I did pick up Mauro Rosales. The one thing to consider, no EJ, no Dempsey. Who does he feed? Obafemi Martin's still on the mend. That could be a concern for you, even though the Sounders have 3 home games after that Columbus visit.
One thing to pay attention to in Seattle is who is going to step up. If Obafemi Martins can't go next week during their double week, it could be Eric Zavaleta, scored recently in a reserve league game. He's listed as a defender in the game. He might be someone you want to get on your fantasy team because obviously a defender gets more points for a goal. He'll be on the end of those services. 2 games next week could be big. Obviously something to look forward to for next week's fantasy. That's all we have. I'm exhausted after this
Wrap it up.
This week.
Wrap it up.
No more Team Wiebe. For Andrew Wiebe, I'm Jason Saghini. Enjoy the holiday weekend. Don't forget, we'll be back on Starting Lineup on Tuesday. I'll be here with hopefully a special guest.
Off to Costa Rica.
Andrew's headed to Costa Rica for coverage of U.S.-Costa Rica on Friday. That's all we have for Starting Lineup this week. Thanks, guys. See you next week.